The cameras flashed, the crowd froze, and just like that, Hollywood had a new obsession.
Yeah, but this time it was a really dark one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals.
From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
And today we are tackling a headline that completely shifts how we view reality TV. Darrell Sheet's final messages reveal the pain he hid from everyone.
It's it's such a heavy topic, but it is so necessary to talk about.
It really is. When a larger-than-life celebrity takes their own life, the media almost always, rushes to find a single simple villain. It's just human nature.
Right, a neat little narrative explanation.
Exactly. And in the case of Storage Wars star Darrell Sheets, a guy known to millions for his booming voice and absolute confidence entertainment news outlets found their villain in a handwritten note that mentioned Facebook bullying.
Yeah, but newly released psychological guidelines actually reveal that the media's desperate search for a simple villain is exactly what makes reporting on suicide so incredibly dangerous.
Which is why we are doing this deep dive today. We've gathered a massive stack of source materials to help you, the listener, understand what actually happened. We're looking at newly released police reports, 911 dispatch audio transcripts from Extra TV, and investigative pieces from TMZ, Us Weekly, Unilad, and the AV Club.
That's a lot of material to go through.
It is. But we are also bringing in a completely different kind of source today. A document from Cornell Health detailing the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, or SPRC, guidelines for safe media reporting on suicide.
And that SPRC document is basically going to serve as our ethical anchor for this deep dive. Because as we reconstruct the timeline of what happened to Darrell, we're also going to evaluate exactly how the public was told what happened.
Right, we're looking at the mechanics of the reporting itself. So our mission today is twofold. First, we are going to look past those sensational headlines to understand the true, multifaceted why behind this tragedy.
Yeah.
And second, we are going to turn a critical eye on the sources themselves, using those official psychological guidelines to grade how the media handled this specific story.
So to really unpack this, we have to start by looking at the timeline of his final 24 hours. This is April 22nd, 2026. As detailed in the U.S. Weekly and TMZ police reports.
Okay, let's unpack this, because these reports rely really heavily on the timeline provided by Darrell's girlfriend, right? Whose name has been totally redacted in the official documents.
Right, and what's fascinating here is how incredibly mundane the beginning of the day was, which just contrasts so sharply with how it ended.
According to her account, the day started relatively normally. I mean, they were working at his shop together, finishing up around 4 p.m. Then Darrell went to an appointment with a redacted individual. His girlfriend told police she didn't know how that appointment went or what it was even about. He comes home, they have dinner, he heads out to the garage, and he's on his phone.
And this is the precise moment the evening starts to fracture.
Exactly. He receives text messages from his daughter-in-law, and these aren't just casual check-ins. She's directly accusing his girlfriend of being suspicious and, literally stealing money from Darrell.
Wow. And the police report notes that reading these messages left Darrell feeling deeply sad and visibly upset. And to understand why that specific accusation hit so hard, we have to look at the immediate context.
Right, the family history.
Yeah, his girlfriend also told investigators that Darrell's son, Brandon Sheets, who fans of the show know as the Sidebed, he had recently visited them. And that visit resulted in these huge, heated verbal arguments over family drama.
It got pretty intense, didn't it?
It escalated to the point where the girlfriend actually had to leave the house because Brandon was yelling at Darrell so intensely. Darrell later confessed to his girlfriend that he didn't want to be alone with his son, that he felt like he had let him down, and that he had been sad as hell ever since that visit.
Man. So his emotional baseline entering this final evening is already incredibly low. He is already feeling like a massive failure as a father.
Right.
So the timeline continues. Around 8 p.m., the girlfriend picks up Darrell's granddaughter from work. They come back to the house, find Darrell in bed, and the two women have a drink together.
And Darrell texts his girlfriend from the bedroom, asking her to come sleep with him. But they lie there, and he just can't sleep. He gets out of bed. Sometime later, she leaves the bedroom and finds him standing in the doorway of his office.
And she calls out to him.
She does. And his final words to her are simply, "Go back to bed."
Oh, wow.
Moments later, she hears a single gunshot.
The 911 dispatch audio, which was widely reported on and published by Extra TV, captures the immediate, just horrific aftermath. You hear his girlfriend in complete shock, telling the operator, "I think he just killed himself. I just heard a gun go off."
It's chilling.
When the operator asks if she saw anything, she says, "I don't want to look." And when the police arrive on the scene, they find a handwritten note tucked inside a black basket in a bathroom closet near his body. The handwriting is really shaky, and it reads, "I could not take any more of the Facebook bullying," followed by a redacted name.
And this is exactly where the media narrative took hold. When tabloids get hold of a suicide note that points a finger, like the explicit mention of Facebook bullying, it instantly becomes the headline.
Right.
It becomes the definitive reason for the tragedy. But when you read the entirety of the police reports, you see a man who was battling severe chronic insomnia for months. When the 911 operator asked the girlfriend if Darrell had ever threatened self-harm before this, her immediate response was, "No, he's had insomnia.
Yeah.
I know he's been just frustrated with his no sleep and his kid."
I really want to unpack this using a different lens because I think the media's framing is fundamentally flawed here. Instead of looking at this like a simple cause and effect, think of Darrell's brain like a computer's RAM.
Like the short-term memory that handles active processing.
Exactly. Because of the severe chronic insomnia, his RAM was almost entirely depleted. His brain literally lacked the biological resources to process information normally. Then you launch a heavy, demanding application, right? The intense family arguments, the feeling of being a disappointment to his son, the accusations of theft from the daughter-in-law.
Yeah, the system is already lagging.
It's barely functioning.
Yeah.
And then you introduce a massive, aggressive virus into the system, the cyberbullying. It completely crashes the computer. But you wouldn't say the virus was the only reason the computer crashed. It was the final blow to a system with zero functioning memory left.
What's fascinating here is that is exactly the physiological mechanism at play. The severe lack of sleep meant his prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logic, emotional regulation, and perspective, was severely compromised.
He just didn't have the biological buffer.
Exactly. He didn't have the buffer required to process the emotional trauma of the family rift or the digital harassment. He couldn't just log off or walk away because he literally couldn't escape his own exhausted mind.
Which brings us to the digital harassment itself. Because this wasn't just a few random internet trolls making mean comments on a photo. And that's not even the wildest part. The sheer scale and aggression of the cyberbullying Darrell faced in his final weeks is staggering, and it requires a much closer look.
Yeah, if you're loving how we break down these complex Hollywood twists, make sure you're subscribed, because we've got even crazier stories ahead in this deep dive.
Absolutely hit subscribe. So, according to reports from Unilad and TMZ, fellow Storage Wars star Renee Nizoda shed light on what was actually happening behind the scenes with this bullying.
Right? This wasn't passive trolling. It was an active, aggressive, and highly coordinated campaign to destroy Darrell's life.
Renee told Us Weekly that an unnamed individual was actively impersonating Darrell online. They were making phone calls, sending emails, and creating entire websites pretending to be him. The bully flat out told Darrell directly, "I'm gonna ruin you."
It's terrifying.
It escalated to the point where, on March 9th, Darrell made a frantic, highly out-of-character post on Facebook. He told his followers he had been hacked by a very evil person. He had to publicly clarify these bizarre, damaging rumors, writing, "I'm not gay. I have made no posts about any children's arcade owner."
Yeah.
He even stated that because of these lies, people were physically showing up to his actual workplace wanting to harm him.
And perhaps the most tragic, helpless part of that March 9th post was Darrell stating that the police were fully aware of the situation, but their hands were tied because Facebook allowed the behavior to continue.
He was completely exposed.
He felt entirely unprotected in the digital sphere, which had now violently breached his physical reality. The harassment wasn't staying on the screen, it was walking through the front door of his business.
This raises a massive question for you listening. When someone is screaming for help like this, when strangers are showing up at their workplace, why was this allowed to escalate? Like, why didn't his circle, his co-stars, his management step in and pull him out of this digital fire?
Well, if we look closely at the source material, we see a glaring generational and cultural disconnect when it comes to understanding the severity of digital harassment. Look at the quotes from his fellow reality stars.
Yeah, what did they say?
Dave Hester was asked about the bullying and casually said, "We've all had a little bit of that. I don't even pay attention to it." Even Renee Nizoda, who later spoke out about how severe it was, admitted his initial reaction was to downplay it. Renee said Darrell told him exactly how bad it was, but Renee, quote, "didn't take it that serious because it's just part of it."
just part of it. The normalization of that kind of psychological torture is just chilling.
It is deeply chilling, and it highlights the incredibly isolating reality for older public figures. Think about it. They achieve massive fame late in life, often through blue-collar reality television, and are suddenly thrust into a hyper-connected, vicious digital world without any of the native defenses or media literacy that younger generations might have built up.
That makes so much sense.
To someone like Dave Hester, a troll is just text on a screen. Just turn off the phone.
Oh.
But to Darrell, who didn't grow up with the internet and suddenly had dangerous individuals showing up at his physical workplace based on digital lies, the threat felt completely inescapable. It felt existentially ruinous.
So his system is crashing, he is trapped by the internet, he is trapped by heartbreaking family conflict, and as we learned from text messages recovered by the police, he was also trapped by his own biology.
Yeah, the physical toll.
Let's shift to the underlying medical factors that predate the intense drama of his final week. Because the digital harassment explains the immediate panic, but to understand why his defenses were so low that he couldn't cope, we have to look at what was happening to his body. And later in the episode, we'll talk about the shocking twist nobody saw coming regarding how the media handled all this.
Right. So the police extensively reviewed Darrell's cell phone, and the U.S. Weekly Report outlines texts that paint a picture of a man desperately crying out for medical relief, whether those around him realize the severity of it or not.
In March, he texted a photo of Zysquil sleep medication with the message, "Bro, I need sleep so bad." But the most alarming text came days later. He admitted to going cold turkey on a specific prescription medication. The name of the drug is redacted in the police report.
Interesting.
He texted, "I knew I had to quit or it would have been a bigger problem." In that same thread, he also admitted he was dealing with a paranoid thing, but said he was just trying to free up his life of stuff again.
Going cold turkey off of a daily medication, especially if it was a sleep aid, a benzodiazepine for anxiety, or an SSRI antidepressant, is a massive physiological red flag.
Totally.
The Mojave County Medical Examiner's autopsy report, which was covered by Chosin and others, revealed absolutely no drugs or narcotics in his system at the time of his death. That corroborates his text message. He really did just abruptly stop taking whatever medication he was on.
But wait, I have to push back on this narrative that he was just a victim of his own ignorance here. We know Darrell wasn't oblivious about mental health. Back in 2018, he made a very public, very vulnerable post about his own battles.
Oh, right, I remember that.
He wrote, "Depression steals our smiles, ruins relationships, and sometimes leads to suicide." He explicitly warned his fans about the dangers. So if he was that acutely self-aware of the stakes, how does someone still fall into the trap of abruptly quitting a medication cold turkey in 2026?
That is the insidious nature of mental illness. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of clinical psychology, we have to understand that awareness does not equal immunity. You can know all the statistics, you can be an advocate for mental health, but when you are in the thick of severe insomnia, your executive functioning is completely compromised.
You just aren't thinking straight.
Exactly. Sudden withdrawal from certain psychiatric or sleep medications doesn't just return you to a baseline. It can cause a violent chemical rebound. It can induce intense rebound anxiety, severe physical agitation, and profound paranoia, which he specifically mentioned experiencing in his text.
Wow.
He likely thought he was taking control, trying to free up his life by quitting the medication, completely unaware that the withdrawal symptoms were rapidly dismantling his neurological safety net, just as a massive wave of external stress was about to hit him.
A safety net he desperately needed, but had unintentionally stripped away. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most important part of this deep dive. You have just heard all these incredibly tragic, intimate details about Darrell Sheets' final days.
Right. We know about the text messages, the family fights, the exact location of the suicide note. We know all of this because the entertainment media published it. But how should they be reporting this? That is where the Cornell Health document detailing the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, or SPRC guidelines, comes into play. The fundamental premise of these guidelines is the scientifically proven concept of suicide contagion.
Contagion, like a virus.
Essentially, yes. This is the reality that how the media reports on a suicide can actually trigger vulnerable individuals to imitate the act. The reporting itself can be a public health hazard.
Let's look at the specific what to avoid section of the SPRC guidelines. First, rule avoid detailed descriptions of the suicide, including specifics of the method and the location. The reason given is that explicit details increase the risk of imitation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second rule, Avoid oversimplifying the causes of suicide or presenting them as a direct result of a single event. The reason given is that studies show 60 to 90% of suicide victims have a diagnosable mental illness or substance use disorder. Attributing the act to a single triggered event like a breakup or a lost job obscures the underlying illness and makes suicide seem like a natural reaction to stress.
So, if we act as graders here, let's evaluate the sources we've been using to understand this story. TMZ, Us Weekly, the AV Club, Extra TV, ULAD.
Yeah.
How did they actually do?
Let's pull no punches. On the first rule, they failed spectacularly. Across the board, these outlets published that the exact cause of death was a single self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. They published that his girlfriend found him in his office.
Oh, well.
TMZ and the AV Club reported the exact, precise location of the suicide note, tucked inside a black basket in a bathroom closet. We even have Extra TV publishing the audio dispatch quotes of the girlfriend hearing the gun go off. That is the exact opposite of avoiding specifics of method and location. It is highly irresponsible.
And on the second rule, avoiding oversimplification, it's a mixed bag, but definitely leaning towards failure. Many of the headlines, like the one from the Chosen report, Darrell Sheets' suicide note details cyberbullying agony, heavily imply a direct, singular cause and effect.
Right. He was bullied online, therefore he took his life.
Exactly. While the articles do eventually mention his insomnia or family issues buried deep in the body text, the headlines and the leads heavily oversimplify the tragedy. They place the blame squarely on the Facebook bullying, which violates the core tenet of the SPRC guidelines.
But I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Are we really giving them a failing grade across the board? The SPRC What to Do section says to always include a referral phone number for crisis intervention.
Yeah, that's true.
And almost every single source we reviewed, TMZ, Us Weekly, UNILED, Extra TV, the AV Club, they all included a prominent note at the end of their articles urging people in crisis to call or text 988, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
That is a crucial win, and it represents a shift in modern journalism. They also successfully followed the guideline to emphasize the role of mental health by quoting Darrell's co-star, Brandy Passante.
What did she say?
Following his death, she posted, "The grief from suicide is endless. There's always help. You are not taking your pain away, you are transferring it to someone else." By amplifying her voice, the media actually helped reframe the narrative back towards seeking help and recognizing the devastating, rippling impact of the act on the survivors.
But wait, I have to push back on this defense of the media. Are we really giving TMZ and Us Weekly a pass just because they slapped a 988 number at the bottom of an article that explicitly exploits a man's suicide note and the agonizing 911 call of his grieving girlfriend?
That's a fair point.
Is it even possible for a tabloid to follow these clinical guidelines strictly without losing the dramatic, sensational hook that gets people to click the article in the first place? Like, can an entertainment outlet survive without the gritty details?
That is the ultimate ethical tension in modern media. The SPRC guidelines are written by public health officials whose sole, uncompromising goal is saving lives. Tabloids are run by editors whose primary goal is generating clicks, engagement, and ad revenue.
Right.
The details, the messy family drama, the exact quotes from a shaky suicide note, the 911 audio, that is the currency of the attention economy. It is incredibly difficult to write a sanitized clinical report of a beloved celebrity's death and expect it to compete for attention online. But that doesn't mean they are absolved of responsibility.
No, not at all.
They prove they can include the 988 lifeline. The next step is exercising editorial restraint in the visceral, dangerous details, even if it costs them a few clicks.
That is a heavy but incredibly necessary realization. And if you want to stay up to date as we keep analyzing these massive media shifts, definitely stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it all together for you listening.
Yeah, let's summarize.
We started by looking at Darrell the Gambler Sheets, a man who projected absolute confidence and certainty on television. But his final days remind us that human crises are never simple equations. It is human nature to want to point to one specific text message, one bitter argument with a son, or one unhinged online stalker and say, that is the reason.
But as we've seen, it's a deeply complex web of biology like severe insomnia and sudden medication withdrawal crashing into environmental stress and inescapable digital harassment.
Exactly. And importantly, understanding those SPRC guidelines fundamentally changes how you will interact with the news going forward. Once you know that publishing the contents of a suicide note or the specific details of a method is actually considered a documented public health risk,
Yeah.
you just can't unsee it.
You really can't. You start reading true crime, celebrity news, and local reports with a different, much more critical lens.
Exactly. You realize the media is giving you the most sensational, clickable pieces of a puzzle, but rarely the whole nuanced picture.
Which brings up a final thought for you to mull over. The SBRC guidelines strongly advise against oversimplifying the causes of a tragedy. They want us to look at the underlying mental health infrastructure, the biology, and the cumulative stress. Yet human nature desperately craves a single villain to blame.
We really do.
We want to be angry at an uncooperative internet stalker or point fingers at a specific family fight because it gives us a sense of control over the uncontrollable. As you navigate the media landscape today, how do we reconcile our deep-seated psychological need for a clear, dramatic narrative with the incredibly messy, multifaceted reality of mental health?
It's a question that certainly doesn't have an easy answer, but it's one we all need to be asking every time we read a headline. You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.